We're ready ahead.
Okay. All right. So welcome everybody. As you guys know, today Jack LaRue was planning on doing some consultation for those of you that are growing giant tomatoes this year. And for those of you that don't know Jack, he's been gardening for over 60 years. He's not a professional agriculture person. He's just a gardener who has learned what works, for him by trial and error. His largest pumpkin has weighed in at 1,732 pounds, and he holds the state record for the largest kohlrabi at 47.5 pounds. Oh, that's pretty big. 2 years in a row with tomatoes weighing over 9 pounds. So he had a 9.44 pound tomato and a 9.09 pound tomato. He's been married for 48 years to his wife, Sherry, and they have 4 daughters and 6 grandchildren, 3 girls and 3 boys. So thank you, Jack, for doing this for us today. And just a real quick reminder, if you guys haven't already done so, please, in the chat box, if you guys wouldn't put your name and then anybody else that's in your party and where you're from, so that this way I have that for my university purposes. So Jack, I'm going to turn it on over to you.
All right. Well, hey, I'm ready to go if you guys are. Sam, I appreciate you and the other Hawaiian growers giving us permission to bring on our local club members that want to learn a little bit more about gardening or growing giant tomatoes. So to start with, Sam, I'm going to direct this to you. Do you have any questions? Hello, Sam.
Hi, Jack.
Hi, Jack.
Hi,
We're here.
Hi, Don.
Hey,
Hi.
Jack.
So, okay, we can start with any specific questions that anybody has. I try to get those started and answer the ones that are out there. And then as we go along, we'll come up with new questions.
Hey, Jack, this is Mahler, Sam's wife. So I have a question for you about pruning of tomatoes. So our tomato plants are fruiting right now. And obviously, it's very hard to always get the suckers out. And sometimes when I notice them, they're already fruiting. And obviously you got to make a decision. Do you pull it out? Do you prune them just to make sure that they're supported and not bending over? Do you have any suggestions about, when not to is there such a thing as over pruning tomatoes?
Yeah, you can over prune anything. You just want to leave on your fruiting spurs and some new vines coming out or extensions of those fruiting spurs, the ones that, the vines that this fruiting spurs are on. That way you can have a continuous harvest all season long. If you're looking for competitive tomatoes, then yeah, you want to prune everything pretty heavy. I'm going to try to find a plate here that addresses pruning. It may take a while. Soil, golly guys, I'm going to go down these one at a time, trying to find environmental conditions, water. Here we go. We're getting close. Pruning. Okay. For competition plants, you just want to leave one tomato on them. You want to get your mega bloom and set. Now, if you're growing them for home use and gardening, you can put several tomatoes on the plant. I mean, you can put 20, 30 tomatoes on there. And I tie the vines up to a fence so that they don't bend over and don't break off. As you saw in that first slide, you saw my high tunnels with those panels in there. I just use twine, baling twine, whatever it takes, just to tie those vines to those panels so they won't snap off. Now, on your competitive fruit, they're going to get pretty heavy and your vine will not support them. They'll pull off. The stem won't pull off the tomato, but the stem will pull off of the plant. So you want to hammock those and protect them from their own weight, from tearing them off the vine. Let's see here. I know I've got pictures somewhere of all this stuff. You can see this one here. This is a mega bloom. And you can see that I've just used floating rope cover as a hammock and just tied it up to my support stakes or to my fence panel just to protect that. Because when these things get to be about 10 to 12 inches around, they're going to start breaking that vine down. So you want to support them early and keep them from separating from that plant. Now, I don't know if I answered your questions, so go ahead and fire at me again.
Nope, you didn't. I think one of the slides also mentioned after 14 days, you can top off the plant.
Yes.
Because my plants are getting a little bit too tall, and I don't know, do I just keep it going and start, being on a ladder to try and stake them, or do I top them? And
Okay, so your plants are getting pretty darn tall then.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's best to keep the plants, within your reach, so you don't have to climb on a vine. You just train them to spread out laterally instead of vertically. Just give room to spread. I put at least 6 feet in between the plants. This year I put 8 feet in between them, and that way I can get more side vine growth and less height.
Got it.
You guys hear all that?
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
breaking up just a little bit, but I think for the most part, we can hear you pretty good.
Yeah, I just got that warning on my computer that my connection's unstable. So, all right. So yeah, what I do for the competitive fruit is once I've got the flower selected and the fruit is set, the mega bloom is set, I see a small tomato on it. At that point, that vine becomes my main vine. I top all of my secondary vines that are on plant at that point. The vine with the tomato on it, that now becomes my main vine, and I let that grow all for another 14 days, and then I'll top that one. Once that fruit does set, I go in and I remove all tertiary vines and all fruit that's set on tertiary vines. Normally I pick those off as they come on, but you always miss a few. So once you selected your mega bloom, go in and remove all the other fruit on the plant, remove all the tertiary vines, and top your secondary vines. That vine that has the fruit now is the main vine. It can go for another 2 weeks and then top that. What that's doing is it's giving it 2 weeks to send all of that energy up that main vine where that tomato is set. So you want that tomato to sync with your plant. And roughly 2 weeks should do it. I got this from Steve Marley, Pork Chop. He helped me with the pruning, and he lets his go about 12 days. I let mine go about 14 days. And you'll spend the rest of the summer pruning off tertiary vines because tomato plants just don't give up. They just keep sending out new vines all the time. So was that clear enough, or do you have any more? Yes.
Nope, that was good. Thank you, Jack.
Go ahead. Is this
Hey,
Jeff?
Jack. Yeah, Jeff Trees here. Just a quick question on something you just said. You said you space your plants 8 feet. I was thinking that you had 2 plants on one 8-foot panel. Am I correct, or?
Yes, you're correct. I had that for the last 2 years, and I'm trying to improve and do better. So this year I put 1 plant on an 8-foot panel.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of space.
It is a lot of space. I think the air movement's going to help. It's going to help probably reduce insect spread. It's going to help reduce powdery mildew and other diseases that might come in just by giving them more space, more room. And they're not competing with other plants this way. I used to have my main aisle on the side of the high tunnel, and then I would run 16-foot of panels and put 3 plants on them. This year I switched and put my main aisle down the center of the greenhouse with an 8-foot panel on each side of it. So I'm cutting back a little bit, reducing the number of plants and giving them more room, and see if that works. You can't do better if you don't improve your process. Experiment. Sometimes you fall flat on your face and have to go back a year, but you just keep trying and you'll find stuff that works.
I have a question about pruning, Jack, and how much pruning is good enough? Like 30%, 50%? What would you recommend?
Over the course of this summer, you probably prune at least 50% off. You know, let me play with my PowerPoint here and try to find a picture that works. Okay, pruning. Okay, this is a full-grown plant that's pruned. Its base is right here, and that plant extends. You can see my cursor.
Yeah.
That plant extends out to about here, and it starts crowding into the next plant. Yeah, that makes it difficult to prune because you don't know which plant you're pruning unless you trace every vine down. So this is one plant from the cursor over to here. You can see it's a pretty good sized plant. That's an 8-inch cinder block on the ground, and that's a 48-inch panel. So that gives us what, 56 inches in height. And you can see I've extended that up. This plant's probably close to 7 foot tall. So that's a picture of the plant in full bloom with all the leaves. This is what happens when you give me a pair of scissors. You can see the structure. Yeah, I get a little carried away. You can see the structure of the plant better this way. This is the main vine coming up, a secondary vine here, secondary. This fruit did set on this main vine. So this one I continued to let grow for another 14 days before I topped that. These vines here were topped at about, well, at fruit set. All of these secondary vines are at fruit set. So this main vine goes up quite a bit higher, but this gives a good idea of the structure of the plant and how many vines I leave on it. And of course, this is the hammock I was talking about to support the tomato. Just a couple pieces of PVC pipe in the ground, run it through the fence panel and clamp that hammock to it, and you're good to go.
But now for the newbies that are watching this, they're not going to be removing all of the leaves and stuff. This was for a demo purpose, right? So they could see the structure. Okay.
Correct.
just so that people don't start pulling leaves off their plants. So.
Yeah, that's why I gave this picture here. This is the plant, you know, before I started whittling away on it. And this is after I got done whittling away on it. And like I said, this is just shows the bare bones of the plant.
So how much do you prune at the time? Like you say, up to 50%, but you don't go and, you know, do all the pruning at once, or do you?
Now what I do is I let the plant grow until I have a mega blossom set. Once I have a mega set and I've decided that's what this plant's going to do, I don't prune a leaf until that time. Or I should say the only leaves I prune prior to that are any leaves touching the ground. You should not have leaves on growing on the plant touching the ground. They can easily pick up a disease, rot off. So once the fruit is set, that's when I start pruning.
So you leave suckers on then too?
All the suckers come off when the fruit is set. Okay. Now, if the fruit sets on a sucker vine, that now becomes my main vine. And I let that vine continue to grow for at least 2 weeks. So at fruit set, the only vine that I leave growing on the plant is the one with the fruit on it. I top all secondaries and I remove all tertiary vines. You can see here where tertiary vines were coming out. Those were removed on fruit set. So all the sucker vines come off once that fruit is set.
I have a quick question, or hopefully it's a quick question. I was always wondering, so like I never have any issues growing the plant itself. Plant will always grow really well for me. Where I start having problems is when I start getting these beautiful mega blooms and they don't set. So what is it that I'm doing wrong? Is it my fertilizing? Is it, you know, did I handle something wrong? I mean, what would you think that could be caused from?
I had that issue a couple years ago with a lot of megas not setting. And on one greenhouse, I really hit it hard with fertilizer prior to fruit set. I lost every mega bloom in that house. So fertilizer prior to fruit set can cause you problems. In some locations, the pollen may not be taken because it's too cold. Pollen might not be ready.
It won't be cold here. We're in Hawaii.
So that won't be the problem. So,
But it could be the fertilizer. So do you at what point would you stop fertilizing the plant so that because I know you can have that same kind of issue like with pumpkins and stuff sometimes too. And
yeah, I backed off fertilizing prior to fruit set. I'll put in the fertilizer in my starter holes to get the plants going, and then I won't hit them with any additional fertilizer other than seaweed formulas and a very light mixture of seaweed formulas. I got an injector set at about 1.5%, and I put a real weak solution in there. And once the fruit is set, then you can go in and add fertilizer around the base of the plant. You can give them drenches, but yeah, prior to fruit set, I have found that I've had problems with too much fertilizer.
so what do you do? Like, for example, because I've always used the wow packs. And so, but that's kind of a constant, what is it, like 3 months kind of fertilizing, and so slow reacting kind of, or release. And so that's going to probably be too much fertilizer then for the plants then?
No, the wall packs are pretty gentle.
Are they? Oh, okay.
They're fine. Like you said, it is a slow release over
Mhm.
3 months.
Mhm.
So it doesn't hurt the plants at all. I used 2 starter packs last year for every tomato plant.
Mhm. Mhm.
This year, yeah, a little more aggressive. I put 3 in most of my starter holes this year. Just got that done yesterday. And then I won't hit them with anything else until I've really got fruit set.
Okay.
I do add, at planting time, I do add some crab and oyster shells to the soil, just a light dusting along my planting strips.
Mhm.
And that's basically just to get more calcium in the ground, because a lot of your blossom end rot is a lack of calcium. When you might have calcium in the soil, but it might not be taken up. So calcium is a large molecule that doesn't transfer well. So a little extra calcium in the soil doesn't seem to hurt them any.
And I know over here, and at least on the Big Island, I know that we've had some issues with our families that have ended up with blossom end rot. And so that might maybe be a good opportunity then for them to add maybe something like this to their soils.
Yeah, you should have some place on the islands where they've got oyster shells.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Ground and processed. Those seem to work pretty good. And again, it's a real slow release, but it's there. Another problem with blossom end rot is too much water.
Okay. Yep.
That is the real culprit, I think, with blossom end rot. I know Rick Spaziani, a really good tomato grower, he took and hit his plants heavy with water. He just didn't think he was watering them enough. Within 24 hours, he had blossom end rot showing up on several of his tomatoes.
Ooh.
So again, with watering, don't overwater. You notice at the base of this plant, I've got the drip tape pulled away as far as I can. I like to get drip tape 2 feet away towards the end of the season. The start of the season, I have the drip tape right next to the base of the plant, but it stays there just long enough to get the plant going and get those roots spreading out. Then I immediately move that drip tape away from the base of the plant, because I have rotted plants out by leaving that drip tape too close to the base before. So water is really important. That's real critical. You try to be very consistent and don't give them a lot to drink. They don't need a lot of water.
That's probably what happened to my 5-gallon bucket tomato last year. I probably overwatered it
That,
and rotted out.
yeah, of course, you had holes drilled in your bucket, right?
Oh, you betcha.
Yeah. That's probably it. That's what Rick did too. He watered some 5-gallon buckets, and boy, it was just within 24 hours he had problems.
Wow.
So watering, let's see. I've got a slide on watering someplace here. Problem is the print's so small I can't read it. Yeah, that's just junk in here. Fertilizer, pruning. Well, there again, pruning. If you want to take a picture of that slide, go right ahead, Don.
Okay.
And Jeff, if you guys want pictures of it, grab it. You got them. Just move on down here and see what I can come up with. Oh, that's too far down. Oh my goodness. I wish these side plates were bigger so I could see. See what
You
I
can
got
expand
on
it
them.
out, but you'll make your slide that you're showing everybody smaller.
Let's try that. There we go. Hey, I never knew that. Cool. Tomato seed selection and soil, starting tomato seeds, transplanting others, companion plants, water. Here we go. I said water is very critical. Tomatoes just hate wet feet. Be consistent, a little at a time. I water 3 times a day using low flow drip tape. Low flow is 0.22 gallons per minute for a 100-foot line. So I have 6 lines in there. So I'm getting about 1 gallon a minute for 6 lines, and I'll let it run for about 30 minutes. So I'm getting roughly 30, 35 gallons of water in a 2,000 square foot greenhouse, high tunnel. And with the temperatures created by that plastic covering, you get a lot of evaporation. So you can see I'm not putting a lot of water on these plants. That was probably about 24 plants per high tunnel. I space my lines, try to get them 3 to 4 feet apart if I can. I use an injector that feeds 1.5%. I feed organic seaweed products every time I water. Once the plants are established, I've moved the lines away from the base of the plant. Too close may result in plant death. Do not go for total zone saturation. Leave dry ground between the lines or plants if possible. Dry ground slows the spread of diseases like Fusarium and Phytophthora. Those diseases spread on water molecules. It's like a freeway for them. So if you give it a little dry ground in there, it just helps slow that process down. Okay, too much water, as we just discussed, can cause blossom and stem end to rot both. And I always keep the leaves and vines dry. I just water the soil. So you guys can grab pictures of that if you'd like.
So I'm curious too on other fertilizing that you do on your tomatoes, and like at what time you're fertilizing with one product versus another. Because I know you mentioned about the seaweed, but I'm sure you probably fertilize with other things too.
Yeah, I do. I use fish fertilizer. And I tried a new product last year. I'm looking for it here. I don't seem to have a picture of it, but it's called Texas Tomato Food. I know Sam knows about it. I picked it up on Amazon. Shipping to Hawaii is ridiculous, but I use the Texas Tomato Food and fish fertilizer once a week last year after the fruit was set. I would take a cottage cheese container, mix up that solution according to the manufacturer's directions, put it in a 5-gallon bucket. Then I would take that bucket around and with a cottage cheese container and just dip out 2 scoops for each plant. I would do that about once a week. This year, I'm going to get a little more aggressive. I'm going to do it two times a week, maybe 3 times a week. I had a professional tomato grower told me that he has never seen a tomato plant that you can over fertilize. Well, I agree partially with that. I think you can over fertilize them prior to fruit set and it cause blossom drop, stems to rot off. So I hold back like I said, until I get fruit set, and then I go out with that mixture of fish fertilizer and that Texas tomato food, just dip out a couple for each plant. Seemed to work. I had 3 plants a couple years ago. The leaves were curled up on them. They weren't doing a darn thing. So I experimented with this. And I started putting this on. Towards the end of the season, I put too much on. I got the plants too wet, and I blossom rotted 2 of my 3 tomatoes. The third tomato, and these are plants that weren't doing anything. The third tomato ended up weighing 8.83 pounds. The one that I didn't rot out. So you just have to play the weather. When it starts to cool or gets a lot more humidity, you just need to back off on some of your additional watering.
So now you mentioned about the leaf curl. I've seen some pictures anyways of some of the top growers that are, getting some pretty sizable fruit and their leaves curl a lot. So now I gather that's normal and what would cause that? So like, we know we're not panicking that we have some other issue involved in that.
Leaf curl it just comes with the tomato plants. It can be caused by heat. Now, if your leaf curls up and forms like a funnel, that's still a healthy leaf. If your leaf curls under, then you've got some type of deficiency or disease coming on. Now, there is a purple leaf curl. I know that Scott Holland had trouble with that last year. It hasn't affected me that I know of. When I see the leaf curl, I just go out and check. If the leaves are curled up, the plant's still healthy. So some leaf curl is the plant curls leaves to conserve moisture. When it gets really, really hot, you'll start to see this leaf curl come on. But if it's an upward curl, you're fine.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? I'm stuck on environmental conditions here. You can see I probably had some leaf curl going on this one here. Let's take a look. You can see I have some leaf curl going, but it's not bad. Another one, little leaf curl. See how this leaf here is curled in? That's an upward curl. No, geez, curl. You're fine. These outside leaves here, all close to the outside of the greenhouse, they're picking up heat through the sidewalls, and they're curling up to protect themselves.
Okay.
Any topic you guys want to talk about? Fire away.
How hot do you let your hothouses get in your tomato house?
Well, I have no air conditioning in them, so I go out. I cover my hothouses with 30% shade cloth. And on a sunny day, if I don't get out there by 10 o'clock in the morning, it can be well over 100 degrees in these high tunnels. So I try to get out there on sunny days early, somewhere around 9:30, 10 o'clock, pull the shade cloth over, and then I'll leave the shade cloth on until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I'll take the shade cloth off. So that way the plants get some full morning sun and they get the full later afternoon sun. But the heat of the day, usually around 3 o'clock is your most intense heat around here. And after that, it starts to cool a little bit, but there's nothing I can do to control the temperature other than that shade cloth. And really, I'm cutting down on the intensity of the sunlight, the UV rays. Plastic I use has got UV inhibitors in it. And with the shade cloth, I can go in on a hot sunny day and it's cooler inside the high tunnel than it is out because I'm not under that intense direct sunlight. The outside temperature, inside temperature will be the same, but it's not as intense, if you know what I mean.
Do you have any suggestions for families, at least over here in Hawaii, especially like where I live, but I am on a bed of lava. So we do not have soil. there are some areas, of course, on the Big Island that do have soil, but I would say that a good chunk of our families that grow giant tomatoes do so in containers. And
Yeah.
so do you have any suggestions on that? Because I always get asked, well, what size should my containers be, you know, to get a sizable fruit? Do you have any suggestions for things like that?
I would suggest around a 10-gallon fiber basket. You know, these they're not they're not a solid plastic, but they are a plastic material that you can use to grow in. That would be a good question for a buddy of mine who grows a lot of tomatoes in containers. But I would say 10 gallons is plenty of soil. As long as you feed the plant regularly, the roots are going to take up what you give it. And if there's plenty of food in that 10-gallon space, the plants are going to do fine. You just want to make sure that it drains well. I would suggest for Hawaii that you use coconut husk and some lava rock. Lava is, your pumice is pH neutral, so it won't affect, you know, the uptake of nutrients to your plants. And coconut husk, they help drain water, but they help retain water as well. It's kind of a cool product. So I noticed that online when I did some research that the coconut husk and 10% lava rock or pumice in there will help as well. Pumice will help aerate the soil. You know, it's porous. It can hold a little bit of water. So that is what I found recommendations for Hawaii.
Okay. Yeah, I know typically too, you know, we get quite a few families that will do the 5-gallon bucket challenge. And so they'll more than likely, or if they live in a smaller area that they don't have very much space, they'll grow in a 5-gallon bucket. And so, but I like the idea with the 10. I know, at least for myself, I went with the 25-gallon, but I'm doing fabric bags. I tried the plastic tubs, but for some reason or another, they seem like they don't aerate as well. And
Okay.
so my soil might like look dry at the top, but then when you get down a little further, it's pretty wet. And so yeah, I'm going to go back to just using the fabric bags, although with the fabric bags, they dry out real quick. So you really have to stay on top of the watering, or at least that's what I found anyways. I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, being consistent with water is, very important. You can't let them get too dry, but you sure don't want to overwater them. You're best off staying a little more on the dry side. So this is what you can see the soil.
Yeah.
Screen up there now. Sandy loam is good. Idea for Hawaii. It's just an idea. Soil that contains pumice and coconut husk. It says coconut husk or coral, whatever you call it. pH is 6.0 to 6.8. Retains water, also drains well. Pumice pH neutral. Possible try for a 10% mix in your soil. Keep the soil loose. Don't compact it by walking on it. The microbes that break down the organics need that oxygen to live and work. Soil must be well drained. It's a good idea to get a good soil test. Soil pH should be around 6.8 to 7.2. That's where I prefer it. I've had real good luck at 7%. So I try to keep my pH close to 7.
How often do you have to check the pH?
I usually just check it once a year, start of the season, before I put the plants in.
Okay.
And my problem here is my water is very high. My well water is a pH of 8.4. So I have to be careful not to add lime unless for some reason it's down. Since I keep the soil covered all winter long, it doesn't leach out. So my soil stays pretty consistent around 7%. And with a pH that's out of balance, it will not allow your plants to uptake the nutrients they need. Out of balance pH locks the soil up and your plants can't pull what they need out of it. So pH is very important. And Becky, I read an article one time about adjusting your pH.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if the guy was off his rocker or not, but he said adjusting pH involves the exchange of electrons that create byproducts such as soil salts. Be careful. I went in, put a lot of lime on my patch years ago and put the plants out there, beautiful plants, and all of a sudden the leaf margins started rotting off. The leaves started turning yellow. And I found out that my soil salts were real high. Well, I put that lime on in the fall, and it really never reacted to spring when it got hot. And when it got hot, it just kicked in, it made that exchange of electrons, according to this scientist, and that created the soil salts. There's other byproducts it creates as well, but soil salts is one that really hurt me. And I had walkway boards out there in my garden, and I pulled those walkway boards aside. All of the plant roots were right up at the surface, right underneath that board. It's like they're trying to get away from all that excess salt that was in the soil. So you gotta be careful. Don't add too much.
I'm going to keep asking questions if nobody else has any questions. Okay, so I'm going to like reel you back a little bit and kind of from the get-go. We do have quite a few families on Oahu that will be new to growing giant tomatoes this year, and I believe that our extension staff over there, I don't know if Christine is still on or not, but they're when they start their tomatoes, I believe they're going to do somewhat similar to me. I give the option for our families to start their own seeds if they choose to. A lot of them, worry that if their seeds don't, make it or whatever, they're out of the contest for the year kind of thing. And so I usually will start plants and then they get a plant so everybody's on the same playing field kind of thing. And so like Oahu's going to probably more than likely start the plants for their families and schools and stuff. But if somebody was to decide that they're going to start their own seeds, what kind of suggestions or how is it that you go about starting your seeds to kind of give them some ideas? Because I mean, I kind of threw this out at what I do at our orientation last weekend, but everybody has their own ways of doing things. So I want to be able to give them the option of knowing other ways to start tomato seeds. So
okay, well, I took a bunch of slides just before the meeting today on starting seeds, and I'll just run through those slides.
Okay.
And let you take a picture of what I do.
Well, I'm recording this, so that I won't have to take pictures, but yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. First of all, you choose the seed that you want. And this one here is my 909 from last year. I grab a paper towel. I put the seed right there on the paper towel, write the weight of the seed and the grower. And I fold that paper towel up, take it to the sink, run a little bit of water on it, get it nice and wet. Then I squeeze the excess water out of it. And you don't want to squeeze it all out, but you get most of it out of there. There'll be enough moisture in that paper towel to get it to germinate. Next thing I do is I'll take it out to the starter house, put it in an open Ziploc bag. I don't close the bag. I just slip this in there. And then I slip it inside of an incubator. This is a Hova incubator. I paid $50 for it on Amazon a couple years ago. I can control the temperature at 85 degrees. I can control it at 75 degrees. It's basically chicken egg incubator. It's got a plate, a pan in the bottom of it where you can add water. So you keep the humidity up. And then in about 3 to 4 days, this seed will be sprouted. So as soon as that root comes out, I pull it out and I put it into my starter cups. Here's another picture of inside of the incubator. There's my thermometer. The heat controls are on the outside on top of it. And like I said, in about 3 days, that should be germinated. So you got to be careful that as soon as that root emerges, that you get it off of the paper towel, because it will grow right into the paper towel and you'll risk breaking that root off. So as soon as that root emerges, take it out and put it in your starter cups. These plants here are probably 10 days old. I put them in these small little 4-inch starter pots. You can see right here, I write the weight of the tomato seed on each one of these pots. And I've set these on a heat mat, set it 75 to 80 degrees. And these lights I have overhead are LED lights. They're the same lights that pot growers use. I put them in last year, and what a difference it made in my plants. I couldn't believe how much better they did under these LED lights. You see this knob right here, that controls the intensity of the light. I can take it to sundown, and I can turn this knob up to full mid on 12 o'clock in the afternoon sunlight. So you can control the amount of light these plants get during the day. I don't leave it on high all day long because it just has a tendency to even burn these leaves. So that is a quick lesson on how I start my seeds.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions on starting seeds from anybody? Unmute yourselves and talk to us.
When do you get started, Jack?
Pardon me?
When do you get started with your germination of tomatoes?
I started them on March 1st this year. Unfortunately, I had a week delay. I had a couple mice get in there and wow, decided that these plants tasted pretty good. So I had to start over. So I think I restarted on the 6th or 7th of March. And my idea there is I want these plants blooming, want that fruit to set right about the summer solstice. I want these plants to have the most daylight they can get when they're growing that tomato. So I noticed that my plants are blooming now. They're about 6 weeks from when I started them. See, March, April, yeah, they're about 6 weeks now from when I started them, and they're just now starting to bloom.
That too.
So Jack, what do you count on to days from, let's say, either when you seed or you transplant to when you're going to weigh that tomato, that competition tomato?
Yeah, let's see, 6 weeks from the start setting. And I don't keep those early blossoms anymore. I found out that those early megas, they show up on these domingos when the plants are too small to support it. So I would say another 2 weeks or so. My 9.44 was set on the 12th of June. And I started that plant, I think the 11th of March. And I didn't harvest that until end of August. And that's going to vary with separate climate, different locations. You know, Jeff, it's so cool out here overnight that plants almost go to sleep, they almost hibernate. So that extends out our growth cycle. Normally, the experts say it takes about 40 days from fruit set to ripening. Out here in these cooler conditions, we can go 50 days between fruit set and ripening. So I'd have to go back and add all those numbers together again. But March 11th to June 12th, what is that, three months?
Roughly.
12 weeks. It was 12 weeks before the plant was really big enough to support a big tomato. So last year I kept a lot of the early mega blooms that came on, you know, in 8 weeks or whatever it was, 7 to 8 weeks. None of them did anything. I got one that was a 4.5 pounder. I weighed that one early in the year. Later in the year, it set a bunch of megas on that plant. I cut it down to 2 megas. And one of them weighed 5.59 pounds and the other one was over 6 pounds. And they were both up about 6 foot high on the plant, growing at the same time.
And so what do you do now with the early blooms? Do you cut those off when you see them, or?
Yeah, I'll just cut that truss off. I'll let the vine grow. It'll send out another truss. And I found with these domingos on your sucker vines that you come out later in the season, if you're going to get a mega, it's going to be normally on the first truss that comes off of that tertiary vine. Kind of watch, and you'll have one mega bloom on that truss. Normally, it's the first truss that vine puts up.
Mhm.
So yeah, that also makes it easier to prune too. Okay, let's throw in a truss to see what else we got on these other vines coming up. That's why I leave a lot of extra vines. That suggestion came from Rick Spaziani. He says, yeah, just leave more. If he doesn't get mega set when he wants, he'll go in and cut the plant back, trim it clear down, and get a whole bunch of new vines started. I tried that, didn't have a lot of success doing that. I found if I just let all the sucker vines go until I get a fruit set, I have better luck.
By the way, those plants that I got from you, the 4 plants, made it all the way across country, made it across wintry West Coast and windy Kansas, and they're now at home in Indiana.
Good. Yeah,
Wow.
I'm still missing that 8, 10 and a half. Yeah, I was going to keep that one for myself, but no, it had a long ride to take. So I'm good. I'm glad it got there in one piece.
So what are you doing to get mega blooms? Because there'll be a lot of times when we'll see that we get, as the plant's growing and everything, we'll get a mega bloom. But then after that, we get just a bunch of single flowers. Is there anything special that you do to get your megas?
Nope, just leave a lot of extra vines on the plant.
Okay.
Until you get that mega. Now you'll see at the end of the season, you'll start getting all kinds of megas.
Mm.
That 810 plant that we just talked about, I had one at the end of the season, probably through 6, 7 megas all at the same time.
Wow.
And I had caterpillar blooms, I had doubles, I had triples, I had quadruples. It was tough cutting it back, but at the end of the season, these plants seem to sense that time's getting short, and they tend to send up more megas late in the year. So the name of the game for me is just leave as many vines on that plant as I can early in the year until I get a mega set.
Yeah, I noticed that too, and it always it's always hard to. Always feel badly when I cut them off, a mega bloom. But then it's like when it's September or whatever, it's like right, that's not gonna be able to mature or anything. So
yeah, you'd have to have it inside. At least in this climate, it has to be inside. And then even keeping it late in the year, that's tough. It gets damp, the humidity's up, it gets cold. And that just opens it up for blossom end rot. This is a caterpillar bloom, what we call a caterpillar bloom. I've never been able to save one of these. These always have gone down on blossom end rot for me. You can see little brown spots starting here. I mean, this is one heck of a caterpillar bloom. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 or 7 different segments to this flower. And I built a tent around it. It was late in the fall. I built a tent around it. I added heat lamps in there, and I still lost it to blossom end rot. So I don't keep these caterpillar blooms anymore. Rick Spaziani had a good one going about 3 years ago. He thought he might have a new world record going. So on behalf of the GPC, Jim Sherwood and I went down there to verify it. And one of these segments on his tomato had completely rotted out. And he had pulled it out, got it out of there, treated it, rest of the tomato was fine. That's the only one of these caterpillars that I've seen make it to the end. And I think it weighed 7.6 pounds, something like that. But yeah, these are just hard to keep. Rick was real lucky that he was able to keep the one he had. He caught it in enough time, broke that segment out of there, treated it with, I think he used Cap-10 on it, or no, he used sulfur. He used sulfur on it to kind of seal up the wounds, and it worked for him. Next.
Jack, I'll jump in. First off, hey, thank you so much for bringing those starts to that last PGVG meeting. Mine is growing down in my basement under some lights, and I got to say, I'm hooked.
Good, Good.
Um,
Get in
could
a
you-
bigger container yet?
Yep, put it in a 2-gallon couple of nights ago. But yeah, I'll be
Good.
transplanting that again later on. Could you repeat the part about you don't want the early season megas, and at what point do you accept the first mega?
I try to accept the first mega when the plant is probably 3 foot tall. You know, or so. The first mega may set on lower than that, but I found that the small plants just don't have the energy yet to support a big tomato. So, like I said, I just won't set anything that's probably less than 18 to 24 inches from the ground. Of course, as that tomato grows, the weight's going to bring it down closer to the ground. But my two big ones have been set at about 24 inches up. And I know a lot of the other big tomatoes have been set 24 to 30 inches up from the ground. So you want a pretty good sized plant to start with. But those plants that you've got, they should be plenty big by, the middle of June to start setting megas on them. I don't know about yours, but mine are starting to bloom already. Starting to show buds.
Not mine, but okay.
Yeah. So it was about 6 weeks from planting until I started seeing my first blossoms show up. So Toby, that answered your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Now, Becky,
Yeah,
I-
oh, go ahead.
I could run down through all of my slides one at a time so you can film them.
Sure.
And it covers most of the tomato growing season. We'll just start off with a few of the basics. And since you're videoing this, we can go through them pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
If you see any questions, have any questions, stop me. So that's what this basically the topics I cover: your seed soil, starting tomato seeds, transplanting, right on down the list. So
What's
then
your
we go to seed
companion plant?
selection.
What's your
Of course,
companion
it
plants about?
depends on- Companion plants are plants that tolerate each other, that like each other.
Mhm.
Some plants absolutely hate each other. Potatoes and pumpkins. You don't want them growing anywhere close to each other because the pumpkin plants would just turn yellow on you. So there's a system called the Three Sisters. I know I've covered this with Sam and his
Mhm.
wife, Sandy, before.
Mhm.
And Becky, you probably know about the Three Sisters.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are beans, corn, and pumpkins. They love each other. Basically, you can plant them all right next to each other and they do fine. But you put a potato in there with a pumpkin, it's not going to work out well.
Mhm.
So the seed selection, you decide what's your goal. Is it home garden? Is it going to be market sales? Or is it going to be competitive? And then you go in and you select the seeds that are going to fulfill what your end use is. Okay, seed selection, we'll go down to seed selection continued. And since you're filming this, we'll drop right on down to soil. We covered a little bit of this. We'll go down next to starting tomato seeds. Showed you the slides. And how this is in writing what I've done there. Transplanting. Like I say, get that seed off there as soon as that root shows up. Get it over into your starter cups. And when they get 4 inches, 5 inches tall, you want to move them to a bigger container. Okay, transplanting, got that covered. Let's go to companion plants. This explains the Three Sisters planting scheme that developed thousands of years ago by the native North Americans. And then companion plants for pumpkins are broccoli, cabbage, celery, roses, peppers, asparagus, also helped by corn, carrots, and many more. But those are your main companion plants to get along with tomatoes. Environmental conditions, very important. Whatever crop you plant, whether it's pumpkin, squash, tomatoes, best to go online and see what environmental conditions they require. Do your homework on them and try to provide them with what those plants like and what those plants need. And that'll get you started pretty darn good if you do your background work on them. For tomatoes, I've gone to the University of Georgia. They've got a good tomato program there. Learned a lot from them. Ideal temperatures, the professionals like 60 overnight, 80 during the daytime. I like it a little cooler than that. 2 years ago, I went to the top tomato growers in the world, looked up their locations, and then I went on to weather.com and I got their daily temperatures and rainfall for every day during the growing season. I charted it out, and I was cooler than all of them, but yet I still had the biggest tomatoes. So it was only 5 degrees difference, but that can extend your growing season. But again, 60 to 80 is what the pros like. I just like it a little bit cooler than that. Okay, water. Becky, here you go. Very critical. Be consistent. Don't overwater.
And they've been told that many times by many different mainland growers about the water, and it's really hard when they're planted outside
It is.
and without any cover over them. They learn the hard way that it those roots go nasty after a while, so they got to learn to keep them dry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my plants, when I pull them up in the fall, the roots are still there. I have not seen root rot. I have not seen root decay. Mm-hmm. So I know that keeping a little bit on the drier side really helps. Having those dry spaces in between, and in your climate in Hawaii, good luck with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, it's sunny, and then 5 minutes later it's raining. So that's why really, if you're growing competitively for the big tomatoes, that's why that plastic cover is so important.
Correct.
Just shed that water off and get it away from the plants.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, down to fertilizer. Still trying to get this thing figured out. I'm gonna roll the dice this year. I put more room between the plants, and I'm gonna fertilize them a little heavier when the fruit's set. Just got to make sure that I don't add too much water when I'm adding additional fertilizer. Like I said, that one tomato grower that said he has not seen a plant that you can over fertilize. Well, that's, in my opinion, after fruit set. He had a plant growing last year, and he took 5-gallon buckets. He had 4 of them around his plant. He drilled holes in the bottom of the bucket, and then he filled one with compost. He filled the other one with Wallace starter packs, the WOW starter packs. And the other 2, I'm not sure what, but they were some type of fertilizer. Well, I think one was a professional grade fertilizer, like a 1616, something along those lines. And then he would go out 1 day a week and water 1 bucket. And then he'd go out another day and he'd water another bucket. And that would drain down through the material that he had in that bucket and feed around the base of his plant. And he claims he had 3 7-pound tomatoes on that plant at the same time by using that bucket method. Now, when you're restricted on soil like you are in the islands, that's probably not going to be a good method for you guys. But if you've got plenty of ground, plenty of soil, you might want to try something like that. I gave it a shot, and it did okay. Did it late in the season. And I got some megas after that were decent tomatoes. I think one of them had that 6.25 on it, and it had a 5.59 on the plant at the same time. That was using the 4 buckets around the base of the plant. But I found that using the cottage cheese container, mixing up my mix of Alaska fish fertilizer or Neptune's fish fertilizer and the Texas tomato food, did just as well, just by scooping that out one day a week and giving it to the base of the plants. Okay, next picture's pruning. For competition plants, do not prune until fruit's set. Becky, you've got all this on film, so we can move on. This is one area that I'm weak, very weak in, disease control. I haven't had disease come into the patch, so I've been pretty lucky. The only thing I've had is powdery mildew really late in the season. And I was pretty much done with that plant anyway. I was just growing tomatoes for the table use on it. And I just pulled that plant out and I used mildew cure on the rest of the plants in that high tunnel and didn't have any more powdery mildew. So, and this winter, we had a winter lettuce crop going. I got powdery mildew on lettuce. So I just tried the old wise tale of spraying it with milk, and that worked. It got rid of the powdery mildew. So, and that was just, why not? Give something a try. Pollination. This is one where a lot of us have trouble with. We don't get our mega bloom set. I have problems just like everybody else. The best thing to do is just get the air moving. Some guys go out with an electric toothbrush, put it on the back of the flower and shake the flower. I'll just go out and blow on the flower. Just go out and blow on that mega bloom 2 or 3 times a day. Try to find a time when the pollen's ready and it's moving. Up here, we're so cool in the mornings. I just have a hard time getting any pollen to move. And that's the whole secret, is you've just got to get that pollen at the right time, shake it around and get it on the female parts of that flower. You saw my panels. I'll go out and I'll grab a panel and I'll just rattle the panel, and that shakes the whole plant. I'll do that and then maybe go over and blow on the flower again. Just try your darndest to get that pollen to move around.
At what point of when the mega bloom opens up, at what point would it be good to try and do some of this stuff, blowing on it or getting wind on it or whatever? Is there like a certain time frame? So like, for example, like with pumpkins, within the first few hours of the flower opening is the best time for it to be pollinated. So on these mega blooms, when they open, how much time would you say that you have to really do this?
On a mega bloom, I'll work on them for a good week.
Okay.
Because on your mega bloom, all those blossoms, those segments don't open up at the same time.
Correct.
Yeah, so you just have to keep at it and you just keep working. I won't give up until the flower starts to dry up.
Okay.
And before 10 o'clock in the morning out here is just a wasted effort. The pollen's just not ready at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do it 2 or 3 times a day, later in the day, in the afternoon, that'll help you out quite a bit.
Okay.
So, but yeah, like I say, especially those butterfly blooms, or caterpillar blooms,
Uh-huh.
I'm kind of giving up on those things. You work on those things for a week or better.
Uh-huh.
There are 7 segments and they all seem to open up on different days.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. And that makes sense. So thank you.
Okay, let's go down. I think that pretty much covers all my topics. Yeah, this goes back to that first slide. Again, just all the different aspects I tried to cover. And let's just take a look at some pictures. High tunnel. Put the ground cloth in here to control moisture. It cuts down on evaporation. It also warms the soil. I used to use heat cables, and I'd dig these holes for my pumpkin plants and put in a 30-foot heat cable around there and cover it back up. And that would heat just that 30-foot area around for that pumpkin plants, maybe 7-8 feet across. And that would be the only part in the high tunnel that was warm. Well, I started using this ground cloth. Jeff Olmeyer came over with a digital thermometer. We pulled this back in early April, late March. The soil temperature was 80 degrees. And that was throughout the entire high tunnel. Everything from one end to the other was at 80 degrees. And that helps heat a little bit overnight. That soil will, give some of that heat off and help keep those plants a little bit warmer overnight. So I've given up on heating cables. This black plastic is much better. And another thing, it, like I said, heat, retains moisture, and I don't have to weed. This stuff takes out all of the weeds. I can pull this off at planting time. There won't be a weed anywhere in this 2,000 square foot high tunnel. And of course, there's the pictures again of the plants, the seeds, and how I got those started. We'll jump down. Again, I took this picture this morning for everybody. Got the plants set out yesterday. This white material you see here on the ground is crab and oyster shell. In the starter holes, I put in Wallace starter packs. I put a little bit of azos in there, and I put worm castings in.
And that's one plant.
That's one plant. Each one of these panels, you can see one plant on each one of these panels. There's 16 plants in here. Okay, let's see here. Click down with, that's the one we're on. There's another picture. Walkway boards. I try to stay on these boards so I don't compact the soil. Compact the soil, you're driving the oxygen out of the soil. Your microbes that break down your organics need that oxygen to do their thing and break those organics down so there's nutrients available for the plants. So the less you compact your soil, the better results you're going to have. Okay. Not very professional on fertilizer, but when I mix in my organic seaweed, I just use a clear plastic cup, hold it up to the light, and if it's this color and a little bit darker, I'm in good shape. If it's lighter than this, I dump in a little bit more. So you can see I don't feed very heavy. This is in a 32-gallon garbage can. I've got my injector set at 1.5%, so I think that's what 1.5 gallons for every 100 gallons go through the lines. So it's a very weak mixture. It wouldn't hurt to increase that a little bit. There again, you see the plant tied up to the panels. I just use these strings to tie the vines up there so they don't break off the plant, don't fall over. Have you seen this picture? And supporting the fruit, you've seen that. This one ended up being 8.71 pounds. And that was the plant. This is what I threw into the starter holes. I forgot to mention this year I did throw in some mycorrhizae and some root shield plus. That helps. It colonizes the roots of the plant and helps prevent diseases. It just gives them a little bit more of a safety shield around them. Try to keep those roots healthy. But this was last year's mix. I didn't use the booster this year, but I used the Bioworks Root Shield Plus, used the mycorrhizae starter packs, 2 last year, 3 this year in each hole. And there's a happy tomato grower right there taking a nap in the patch. Where'd I go? Come on back here. Yeah, that was a 9.44. You can see that one's hanging right down on the ground, but the stem goes up here a ways. I think that was probably about 18 inches off the ground when I started it. It set and it just kind of settled down a little bit. Put those hammocks underneath it, keep it from pulling itself off the plant. Okay.
How do you keep,
This is in the,
go ahead.
yes.
I was just wondering on your tomatoes, how do you get your tomato to get colored all the way around, like so uniformly? Because I always see a lot, and especially with my own too, where one part of it will turn like cherry red before the rest of it, and it's kind of like, okay, I have to go ahead and pick it now because otherwise it's going to rot because that one side's already red and the other side's still a little on the green side. So how do you manage to get it uniform color?
Luck of the Irish.
Oh.
Now I may help a little bit because I cover these with a cloth.
Mm-hmm.
You saw that support that I had right here.
Uh-huh.
It's supported down. What I'll do is I'll take an old t-shirt or old terry cloth towel and I'll lay it over this bar here. And I just completely shade that plant, that tomato.
Mhm.
I keep it in the dark. And with that towel, it also keeps it dry. So I keep the intense sunlight off of it.
Mhm.
So it slows the ripening process just by shading it and keeping the moisture off the condensation from the high tunnels. I want to keep that off because that will cause possible rot to get started. So I don't have a picture of that, but yeah, I do. I hadn't mentioned that, but I do cover it with a cloth. Every one of those tomatoes is covered to keep from getting sunburn
Mhm.
and try to, like you say, get them to ripen uniformly.
So
Most of the
maybe
time-
I might just have mine might just be not dark enough or something, because I do cover mine to prevent it from sunburn and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I'll try something a little darker and see if that works.
Yeah, and and it's just, you roll the dice.
Uh-huh.
Pork chop, Steve Marley, he's worked with you before.
Yes.
He's the one that he keeps telling me, he says, let it go red. Don't pick it too early. He gets on me because I have a tendency to pick it earlier than he would. So he says, just let it go.
So that's a question then for you then too, is how do you know when to pick it? Because I was told that once it gets too red, then you start losing weight on it.
I've been told that too. And I don't know how true that is.
Okay.
The only way you'd really know is to put a scale underneath it, and that'd be pretty hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
I push it as long as I can push it. When I start seeing skin splits show up,
Mm-hmm.
those real shallow skin splits will dry up. But when you start seeing those skin splits, it's time to pick it.
Okay.
The first, you'll get a small skin split. Yeah, it's time to pick it. That stem split will dry, or that skin split will dry up on you. Another thing I do is, you see right in back of this tomato here, I've got a fan blowing on it. And when it starts to ripen, I'll put that fan on there and I'll keep air moving past it. So it's constant circulation to help cut down on any possible mold
Mm-hmm.
or dampness getting on there, causing a rot spot.
Mm-hmm.
And one other thing I haven't covered is on these mega blooms, they always get that recession at the stem where you get that dark cavity down around the stem.
Yeah.
Bugs like to get in there. And Dan Sutherland helped me with this. He said, put sulfur in there, get those bugs out of there, because he said those bugs will get down in there and start to eat, and then your tomato's going to rot at the stem. So I grabbed some, what I thought was sulfur that I had in my shed. Turned out it was 7 vegetable dust.
Mm.
So I just sprinkled that 7 down in there. Well, first couple before I realized that's not sulfur. It was 7 dust, but that chased the bugs right out of there. Chased it right out of there. And then when I picked the tomato, I just took it over underneath the faucet. That 7 rinsed right out of there. So that's something for the competitive tomatoes to keep them healthy that you may want to think about doing.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these competitive tomatoes, I don't eat them. I just save the seeds and send out the seeds. So in the last 2 years, I've sent over 8,000 tomato seeds out.
Wow.
In the last 2 years. So that's where these big tomatoes go for me. I just save the seeds and then send them out to clubs and growers all over the place. And introduce myself. Here I am, a few years ago. My wife, Sherry. That's Mount Denali in the background. Sometimes you just have to get out of the garden. Just get out and go do something and let the plants do their own thing. And it helps to have a friend like Cindy Toback around who come over and check on them to make sure everything's okay. But yeah, that year we grew I think a 1,300 pumpkin. And then ended up winning Yasugi Farms, and we were gone for about 12 days. So you can take vacations in the middle of summer. Well, that pretty much ran all of my slides for you, Becky.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. One of my pretty pumpkins. Barrels. All right. Anybody else got any other questions? I get off this pumpkin picture and get back to tomatoes.
Hey, Jack, this is Sam. So quick question for you. So when you were on our previous discussion, you were telling about when you start the seeds and try to get the maximum daylight out of it, so to get the biggest tomato. So my question is, do you try to supplement them? I remember you talking about like you get 14 to 18 hours, something like that, on your sunlight for the plants. Do you actually supplement more lights for them in your greenhouse and try to grow a bigger tomato, or you and that's about it?
You know, I have not supplemented light in the greenhouses. It's not a bad idea. Hadn't thought of it, Sam. But I do supplement light in my starter sheds. I had the light come on about 6 o'clock in the morning, and it runs till 10 o'clock at night. And then I shut it, then it shuts down. So early stages when they're just getting going, I do supplement light. I have not yet in the greenhouses for the tomatoes. Now I did that last year for pumpkins, and when I put in that additional light on the longer hours early in the season, it made a big difference in plant growth. The plants did take off. So I'm sure if you supplemented light early in the season on your tomatoes outside or in your high tunnels, that the plants would probably grow faster. Did that answer it, Sam?
Yeah. I was just wondering if you do supplement like that. That's all. I mean, like you were mentioning, you want the maximum daylight for the tomatoes. So
yeah, I try to catch the maximum sunlight I can during the summertime. I could hang in a few LED lights. They don't take a lot of energy, and in a small cover, you know, maybe 10, 15 foot long, that'd be, I think, a real benefit. They get that additional light in the coolness of the day. They could grow good without being stressed out by that intense sunlight. I think I'd probably have it come on about 5 or 6 in the morning, run till about 9 o'clock. And then maybe have it come on around 7 o'clock at night and run to 10 o'clock. That might be a good thing to try, Sam.
yeah, I was thinking about set up and see if that's a possibility and if that would be helpful. So that's fine. That's why I was asking.
Have you picked up any of those LEDs yet?
No, not yet. We're still planning and see what's just the route to go. So
Yeah,
just debating.
That idea might just take it to the next level. Don't get me started. I'll be in my starter shed pulling lights out this afternoon.
Oh, maybe you can experiment and let us know. Maybe you'll get a 10-pound this year.
Oh, let's hope so. We're shooting for that 10-pound challenge. You all know about Eddie Zakowski's contest. The biggest 10-pound tomato, you know, of the year. The first one. First tomato to break 10 pounds. And if it's still that heaviest tomato at the end of the year, he's got a $3,500 cash prize sitting there for you. But it has to hold it through the season. If somebody else gets the one 1/100th of a pound bigger, you're out of luck.
Worth a shot.
It's like between me and Chris Brown last year, it was a photo finish.
Yeah.
I mean, his was 9.06, mine was 9.085. Thanks to math, I had a 9.09. So yeah, that's a photo finish at the racetrack. Any other questions?
Have you noticed a difference between the Domingos and the Big Zacks at your place? I've had good luck growing both of them here.
Yeah, the first big one I grew, 7.19, was a Big Zac, but I've gone away from the Big Zacks now. The Domingos, I like the plants better. They grow faster. They're not as dense. They're easier to prune. And for me, they throw a lot more megas than the Big Zacks did. I had probably 40% Big Zacks last year, and I think the best I did was a 5-pounder. But for the last 2 years in a row, my Domingos have been growing me the biggest, the heaviest ones, and throwing lots of megas. So right now, I'm strictly Domingos, except for I've got one big Zach that Dehu sent me from France. He sent me an 807. I put those big Zach seeds in. They were the first ones to germinate, and they were my strongest plants right off the bat.
Hmm.
What are these mega big Zac? I think is what they're called. Because somebody had sent me some seeds of those.
Was that Rich Baziani by any chance?
I believe they're his seeds. It's not from him, but somebody gave them to me.
What do you call it? Call it a mega Zach, I think it is.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So what's the deal with those?
He crossed a big Zach. He crossed a 710 Foss, I believe it was, with a Domingo. It might have been the 9. Yeah, he calls it the Big Marley. One of them's called
yeah. In fact, Big Marley. Yep.
Yeah, he crossed the 965 Marley with the 710 Bill Foss seed. The 710 was a big Zac that's done really well.
Mhm.
And of course, the world record 965 Marley. He crossed those two, and he called that cross the Big Marley.
Oh.
And I know that Udo over in Germany drew an 8-pounder in a container off of that seed.
Oh, because I started a couple of those seeds. I didn't use all of them. They haven't yet germinated yet, but yeah, I'm curious to see what those were going to do in comparison to like the regular big Zac. And then of course yeah.
Is it the 666 or the 4.28 that he sent you?
I'd have to look at it. I'll text you or not text you, but I'll email you a picture of the seed packets.
Yeah, I've had better luck with the 6.66. I got a 6.72 off of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 years ago, but I didn't put any of those in this year. I've just had so much better luck with the Domingos.
Mm.
But that Big Marley has done really well for a lot of people. That's a good seed. I just haven't had as much luck with it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if any of our families end up with if they germinate everything. We'll see if anybody ends up with them this year, or if not, then I'll take it and let them grow it. So
here's a question for everybody listening out there. Have you people joined a tomato team for this competitive team tomato competition?
I did.
You did? Is
Yep.
that Becky?
Yep. I'm on the draft.
Oh, you're on the draft.
Yeah.
How about a Hawaiian team? Have you got people that want to team up and put a Hawaiian team out there?
We could try. I mean,
it's fun. It's free to enter.
yeah.
Yeah. So I teamed up. This will be my 3rd year on a team, and we just got our trophies from Steve Marley.
Mm-hmm.
Just sent our trophies out to us. So the winning team, each member gets a trophy, and you can put it in your trophy room. So
Yeah, I did it last year with Tim White and Joseph Young, and and yeah, I mean, of course, Joseph's tomatoes were really, really good. I had that controversial tomato, and so I decided to not use it, and so of course I had a slightly smaller ones that I think I threw in there, and of course Tim did really well with his tomatoes and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah,
It was fun.
It'd be kind of cool having an island team. I mean, if you get 3 people and it's the first team ever, you're going to have the team title for Hawaii.
There you go. Yeah, we can see if we can get a team together.
Yeah, I tried to encourage it at the meeting. I took 48 tomato plants that I had started. Every one of those seeds I wanted to go into my garden. I mean, they're the top 20 seeds in the world. And every one of those tomatoes went in a silent auction. I couldn't believe it. And I think we created a few more teams, maybe a couple more teams in our club. So this competition it's fun because it continues all summer long as you weigh your tomato. I think it was Mike DeMars that was tracking that last year, and he would send out postings every couple weeks on the weight of the tomatoes and the teams. He'd have all the teams down with their team names, and he would post their weights as the season went along. And then if you got a bigger one, then he'd take the smaller one off and put your heavier weight on there. So that was fun. It was fun watching those come in every week. with the pumpkins, you don't know anything till the end of the year, but with this early team tomato, you can see the competition all summer long and which teams are coming on strong, which ones are falling back. Yeah, so we were on a select team last year, Scott, Cindy and I, Scott Holland, Cindy Toback and I. We ended up taking the title. So we're back again this year trying to repeat. Won't be easy. Canadian teams were chasing us pretty close last year. So yeah, there's that $3,500 prize out there for the 10-pound tomato. There's a team challenge. There's a 5-gallon bucket challenge. So tomatoes are kind of fun because there's several different, categories you can get into, several different awards. So anything else? Don, you got any more questions? You got to have something.
I think I'm good, really. You covered it really well.
Yeah, we covered a lot of stuff today. We can get much more detailed than that. Plan to do the same thing on the 3rd Saturday of May. Get together again. Plants will be in the ground by then in most locations, and we'll talk about flower selection, which we covered a little bit today. Try to answer any questions that you have. But until then, I would kind of tap a light on fertilizer. The mycorrhizia, the root shield, that's not going to hurt you at all. The starter packs are mellow enough, they're time release. So it's at slow release, so they won't hurt your plants at all. And of course, moisture shell, that's basically calcium. And when they're in small part, I add a little bit extra calcium every year. My calcium levels are normally way above what they recommend. You can see calcium here. Mine is 6,100 parts. They recommend 1,500 plus. So you can see I keep my calcium very high. It's not unusual for me to get it up over 7,000. Calcium, like I said, does not move around well in a plant. It's a large molecule. So just because you've got a lot in the ground doesn't mean you're going to have a lot in your plant. There's my pH at 7.0. Yes.
So does does calcium, or having that much calcium in there, does that block off other nutrients possibly?
I don't think so. Because like I said, a lot of that won't be taken up. Now, I may be wrong. Becky's probably a lot more up on this than I am.
Oh, no.
Yeah, calcium just does not move around. On our pumpkins years ago, we would take mixed calcium in a bucket, soak towels in the bucket of water, and then lay them over our pumpkins with the idea of getting that calcium that penetrates through the skin, because it just doesn't come up from the roots easily. So we would try that to harden off the shell with hopes of making the shell denser and heavier. Make that pumpkin a little bit heavier any way we think of. We've tried a lot of crazy ideas over the years, and some of them have worked pretty good. So you got a picture of this too, Becky?
I do. It's on the recording.
Okay. Like I said, I'm not real good about keeping my soils balanced. You can send in tissue tests if you like to see how your plant's doing. I know a lot of pumpkin growers do this, that every 2 weeks they'll take and send in a tissue test and see what's in that plant and see what's not in that plant. And then the lab I use, Western Labs out of Parma, Idaho, they will give you recommendations of how much you need to add per 1,000 square foot to get that nutrient up to where it should be for that plant. I know Steve Delitas does this on a regular basis, and you can see what Steve's done. For your tomato growers, Steve is one of the top pumpkin growers in the world. And a 2,000-pound pumpkin for him is getting to be kind of the norm. So yeah, the tissue test does work. I'm sure that John Taberna would perform tissue tests on tomatoes leaves if we sent them in. But then you're talking highly competitive, and it gets a little expensive sending those tests in all the time. And from Hawaii, getting it to Idaho, well, you'd have labs there. You have a lab in Hawaii that can run that, I'm sure.
Yeah, the University of Hawaii does soil testing, but I know for myself this year I'm sending it to Western Labs for my pumpkins anyways. So
Yeah, John, I did a 3-year study with him and we played around with different stuff, and he found that giant pumpkins like a higher pH than normal pumpkins. Right? When I broke the world record in 2004, I took a soil sample right at the base of that plant at the end of the season. I think my soil pH was 7.6. I got beat by Al Eden in Canada by 25 pounds. His soil pH was 7.4. So giant pumpkins like a little sweeter pH. I know that most people recommend 6.8. I think they're missing the boat on that. I think they could go a little bit higher. Okay. Well, we're at 3:30, so it's been an hour and a half. Glad to answer any more questions. So do you guys want to do this again in another month?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
I can certainly set it up for you guys if you'd like.
All right.
So yeah, send the word out there, Becky, and let your growers know.
Yeah, I
We
could do that.
covered-
Yeah, same
we
time.
covered-
As they say, same time, correct?
Same time, different day.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had a lot of our club members couldn't make it because they're still working right now.
well, another possible option, I know, we do our talk story sessions. Well, we won't start until probably like around June. But that's always an option too for Saturday, if you wanted to try to do a Saturday.
Yeah, let's do a Saturday. And
Okay.
originally it was set up to do once a month on Saturday.
Mhm.
We can continue that if you want, or we can skip a month.
Yeah.
I would think let's continue because there's a lot of people couldn't make this meeting, and let's do it on the third Saturday of May.
Third Saturday. I'll have to check the schedule and make sure nobody else is booked on that day.
Okay.
But yeah, I can get back to you, and then Brian sent out word to everybody in the group, so I could just forward him the information to get it out again.
That would work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and then you can send it out to your Hawaiian growers and see how
Yeah.
many we can get in, because we'll have new people. We'll repeat a lot of this same stuff we just did, because basically we just covered the entire tomato season
Mhm, mhm.
here. And a lot of information in a short period of time. But if people took pictures, if they did screenshots, the information's all there in black and white.
Mhm.
And if there's something we missed, then they can ask those questions. So I hope people are taking screenshots. So,
Yeah, and if not, I can certainly, if you want, I can send this recording to Brian to send out if you want him to do that.
yeah, that'd be fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just trying to help everybody do things a little bit better,
Yeah,
get healthy food, and not so dependent on the grocery stores.
for sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Jack.
You're welcome.
No, thank
Angela,
you,
Jeff,
Jack.
you still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Thanks, Jack.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging in there, and good luck in Indiana this year.
Oh, thank you. You made me think about a few things today.
Yeah, I learned a lot actually. And next month we'll give you an update on the tomatoes.
All right. I just gave you a lot more work, didn't I?
Probably.
Yeah, I've been known to do that. Toby, everybody else is listening. Dawn, thank you for being here. Sam, still here, Sam?
Yep, I'm here, listening.
Yeah, I haven't put you to sleep yet.
No, not at all.
And Sandy
Here's a-
actually made it on. She came on just a few minutes ago, so she'll get a chance to look at the recording, I'm sure.
I gotta take my hat off to Sam and his wife. Boy, they've been through this. They're diehards. They're tough. They hang in there. No matter how I try to put them to sleep, they're there.
We appreciate your time, Jack. Feel better. Get well soon.
Thank you. Yeah. Better, a little bit better every day. So we just one step at a time, just like growing tomatoes, just one step at a time. All right, guys. Well, thank you for being here. And I hope we all got some information out of that. I did. Sam
Yeah.
gave me new idea.
There you go.
So, all right, guys. Well, we'll see you in May.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording then.
All right.
Thank you, Jack.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Glad